after the psychotic break happened, we were able to get that under control. Then I had this manic episode immediately after that, and it was very difficult to get that under control. While I had this manic episode, I walked 81 miles just going back and forth of this hospital wing over the course of 4 days.
Hi all, this is part 2 of my conversation with Joshua. A quick reminder to please like and subscribe to my channel if you find it helpful or if you think someone else might find it helpful. I'm just trying to get my word out and help as many people as I possibly can. Your help is greatly appreciated. Thank you. So you were telling me you wanted to write a book, or you had been writing a book? I'm not
Yeah,
entirely
I
sure. Tell me.
yeah, I have been, so
Okay,
it's
cool.
this is part of my coming out, I guess you could say, of having bipolar. And it's like a tools-based book for people with bipolar, and it's
Cool.
going to be one of a series of volumes. That's a plan that I have, just essentially giving people with bipolar tips to help manage the illness. So everything from medication management to exercise and some of the other usual suspects. I want to pack it in there so it's like a reference, if you will, that people will have about what they can do to you know help get through the storm. Family support network, or a support network, I should say. It doesn't have to be family. That's really important. That's up high on the list. But the number one and number two is medication and psychotherapy. Like there's just, I wish that there was another way around it, but if you don't have medication, you you can't take care of your bipolar if you don't have medication. There's just no two ways about it. Like you can't like eat a specific diet and that'll put everything in remission. You can't exercise your way to bipolar. I mean, all these are important parts, um, but they're also important parts of like daily living. So, um, yeah, that's what I'm looking to do. Still in the very early stages of it, you
It
know.
doesn't matter. I think you must be commended for even taking it on. People have given me credit for wanting to do the podcast, just to give people like yourself a place to speak.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's absolutely
Yeah,
fantastic.
so I'm sorry I said that. I led that conversation, and it sounded as if I was looking for praise. I didn't mean it that way. I mean,
Yeah, no, no, no.
I can recognize the desire to do some good that you have in you, and I really respect that. And I must say, well done to you. I'll tell you
Oh,
what. I'm
thank
going
you.
to ask you something. If we will get a little intro to your book, the most important piece is to have medication and psychotherapy.
Yeah.
What's a little piece of advice you would give someone that's a bit more nuanced or not as well known, or you found from personal experience that really helps? Well, what
Well,
helps you?
I'll share this, and this is really difficult, or it has been difficult for me, and that's be kind to yourself. The kinder that you can be, I think the easier you're gonna make make everything be. I mean, if you go and do something off the wall, and or in a manic episode or in a depressive episode for that matter, and then you realize like, hey, I probably shouldn't have, thrown all the plates through the window or something like that, then, just be nice to yourself. Don't beat yourself up for that, you know. Obviously, it wasn't a great thing to do, and it's not that having bipolar is an excuse by any means, but be nice to yourself.
It's vital, isn't it? And it's something I find very difficult. I believe most of the way we talk to ourselves is learned. And it's definitely my experience where whatever I could do wasn't good enough. I was always blamed for things going wrong in the family. I was blamed by my mother for not pleasing her, not giving her that narcissistic supply. And I'd go away as a child and think, God, you're such an idiot. You've done this again. Like, no wonder she hates you.
Hmm.
And internalizing that is really damaging, and you bring it forward to an adult, to being an adult, and you still think the same ways if you don't correct that behavior. It's vitally important, and I've got better at it. I don't know about you, I find myself now catching myself when I'm being cruel and mean to myself. So my instant reaction is to say, you're fucking useless, you're no good at anything,
Hmm.
kill yourself, whatever. But now I hear myself saying those things, and I'm able to pull myself back and say, hang on, that's the old you. That's not really what you think, is it? You're actually a nice guy. And it doesn't happen in those steps.
Hmm.
I'm very good at catching myself. I released a video on it, which I must link at the end, a week ago. Catching yourself as you're saying those things and stopping it at that point, changing it and thinking, no, I'm a good person, stops those negative emotions flowing through your body and stops the downhill, the cruelty, the meanness, the anger to yourself at the source.
Hmm.
And it's a skill that maybe I should create a video educating people on how to do that, because it's quite a difficult skill to learn. And it's something you have to get better at with experience. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I mean it's self-awareness, right? It's having that really dialed in so that, when, let's say, in my case, when a manic episode or depressive episode happens, that you're aware to it, or, if in your case, when you're being hurtful to yourself, thinking hurtful thoughts, um, whatever they may be, having that awareness to say, like you did, stop, stop. There's no reason there's nothing good in beating myself up. There's really nothing good in it.
No, unfortunately for me, I think I'd just gone through life so often being so cruel to myself and so mean and doing the same things over and over and over again and putting yourself into sad frames of mind as a result, that after a while you realize you have to do something differently and you start
Yeah,
to get better
it's
at
true.
it. And like you said earlier, the love of a good woman is really key. When I mean, I found myself, I punched myself in the face not even that long ago, a few years ago, and I've hurt myself, punishing myself for doing something totally irrational. And my partner would pull me to one side, give me a hug, hold my hand, and say, no, you don't do this. This is not how you behave. You're a good person. You need to love yourself. I think through her love, I really developed those skills. And I think maybe you might have done as well with your wife, I'm guessing, because she sounds
Yeah,
like an incredibly supportive figure for you.
she's unbelievable. Yeah, she is incredibly supportive, in in everything that I do, from whether it's work to whether it's, swimming, getting exercise to cooking to you name it, like she's my number one cheerleader, and I'm really lucky to have her, because it could be the other way. I've definitely had my fair share of bad relationships, and at least one of them has been really terrible. And you just you don't get, or when you don't get the love that you deserve, bad things happen. You know,
Or when
especially
you
when you
get the
stay in it.
Yeah, or when you get the wrong love and you misunderstand, you learn the wrong things about relationship dynamics. I became a people pleaser because I found that everything that I did wasn't good enough, and then I took that into my adult life, and I began almost being manipulative in friendships, in that I felt like I had to give all of these things to get love, and it's actually dishonest. Yeah, and if you've learned bad relationships and you've had bad experiences as a child, you do tend to fall into those bad relationships as an adult as well. And it sounds like maybe that's what you did with the one bad relationship you had.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, I think that the bipolar kind of obscures that, because probably getting with this woman in the first place, what I was in some kind of manic state, and euphoric, and everything is great, and then you stay with it, and then you know how it is. Like, you get into a
I
relationship with
do.
somebody and you just settle in, and then the all the negativity becomes the norm. And I was so busy cycling between mania and depression that, I didn't really give myself, or not, I didn't give myself, I didn't really have the opportunity to, just step out and say later, and just move on and leave them. And that's tough, that's really tough.
I'm I'm guessing there was a lot of. Sorry, please
Yeah,
go
I
on.
mean, relationships in general are tough. I just think about all the relationships that, could have been, that weren't. There's this one particular woman who I was actually head over heels in love with, and she, I kind of very unceremoniously, like, kind of kicked her out of my apartment, and
At the end of the relationship.
no, it wasn't the end of the relationship. It wasn't, and that didn't go over too well, as you could imagine. And then I just stopped calling her, or talking to her, and she called me a few months later, told me she loved me, and I was just kind of like, whatever. And I regret that so much, because she was somebody who I really aligned with, somebody who I believe I was, like, extremely compatible with, in every way, physically, mentally, socially. We all kind of had the same, or we both kind of had the same goals, the same way about us. And yeah, that I regret. There's few regrets that I have, despite living this life of bipolar. And definitely she is one of them, and then Syracuse is the other.
Let's not bitch about Syracuse again, or they might sue
Yeah,
one of
no, no,
us.
no.
But
That was
um,
just that's a quick aside.
no, you're fine. Even if they do suck, screw them. But you wouldn't have ended up with your wonderful wife if it weren't for this relationship. So
True, but that could have been a wonderful wife as well.
true.
You know, I
You need
like
polygamy in your life.
that's no, that's too much stress.
So
Yeah, I know. But I do think it'd be too much stress. I mean, I've seen
one
polygamy
woman's enough.
firsthand. In Nigeria, it's still permitted. It's
True.
still
Yeah.
it's still a custom. It's not you know adopted by much of the younger crowd, but some of the older crowd, they have that. And I just, I don't know, I'm a one woman. I could not see myself being with two, three, four women. I just couldn't. The expense,
The
monetarily, the
expense.
no, I'm serious. The expense
Because they,
monetarily,
they like
the
shiny
ex,
things.
the expense emotionally,
Yeah.
the expense physically, like, all of it is just, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it, because you're going to have a favorite too, right? I mean, there's going to be a favorite out of a lot. Like, everybody isn't going to be equal. There's going to be some that you like more than others. At least in what I've seen. In what I've seen over there, like, that's been the case in
As
in
far as
my
I know,
experience.
as far as I know, polygamy, I think, is on the rise, particularly with younger generations and with the LGBTQ community. Um, but don't quote me on that. I think that is the case. I don't know. With the younger generations, we have a different view on marriage and families and relationships than we used to do 30, 40 years ago. Fewer people are getting married and settling down at a younger age. So I don't know, maybe it's a change in culture. But I
Yeah,
agree with you. Polygamy is, what can I say? I've got a good one at home as it is, so I'm happy.
yeah, same here.
So we spoke briefly about your book, and it sounds like you've had a lot of crazy experiences that have led you to this point where you want to
Yeah,
share your story. Maybe I'll embarrass you a little bit and ask you to tell us about some of your worst episodes and
sure.
the experiences you went through, and maybe how you felt at the time, what surrounded those episodes. We spoke about the depressive episode recently that you went through in 2024. Perhaps we talk about a manic episode, which to some people, they just naturally assume that it's great, amazing thing where you have all this energy and you're happy and positive and you can do anything you want. But that's not really the case, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, you can do stuff, sure, just not very well. The quality of work that you're going to bang out is really subpar. But of course, while you're doing it, you think, oh, this is amazing. This is the most compelling piece of literature ever written. Like, you get those kind of grandiose thoughts of your abilities and whatever it is that you're working on. But getting over to an episode that this was wild. This is a wild one. So, and it happened last year.
So
So in
2023.
2023, yeah, yeah. So in April, beginning of April, I started doing this thing where I was just very briefly, I would just laugh uncontrollably. Like I'd be reading comments on a blog, reading um, whatever, just reading something or like thinking about something, I would just laugh, find something unusually funny, like I would just, burst out into this laughter. And the laughter, it wasn't a normal laughter. It was like this deep belly laughter that, it's like you're laughing it's like the funniest thing that you've ever seen,
But why?
or heard.
Was there
I'm,
something
I'm,
in
get- I'm
particular you were laughing at, or
it. Well, yeah. I mean, it could be a blog post. It could be, just a random thought that I had. It could be, a
literally
comment.
anything?
Literally
Okay.
anything. But it didn't happen all that often. And then it started happening often. And then it started happening more often. But on the other end, I would start crying uncontrollably. And so for a couple days, I was going between laughing uncontrollably and then crying uncontrollably. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was physically painful, because my body would clench up and I was just shaking. And it's so this experience is what they call a psychotic break. Like I couldn't do anything. And I went to the hospital for this. I went to the mental hospital because it was crazy. It was really out of control. And, fortunately I live in New York City, so we have, great resources here. And
Good.
I went to a hospital and, I was admitted. And in there, after the psychotic break happened, we were able to get that under control. Then I had this manic episode immediately after that, and it was very difficult to get that under control. While I had this manic episode, I walked 81 miles just going back and forth of this hospital wing over the course of 4 days. So I really, really, and I was also pacing in my room, but I was just going back and forth, and I was just like, holy shit, this is crazy. I mean, it is crazy. Long story short, everything finally got under control, almost under control, and I was discharged, but I was in there for a month. And that's really rare these days. The quality of medication and quality of care, typically they have you in and out in 8 days. Like that's what their averages are, I guess would be the way
Sure.
to say that. And
Sure.
that's what I was told by my doctor and also other, medical staff there. So I was in there for a month, and yeah, it was, I guess, about as good as it could be, but it was pretty terrible at the same time. And, when I came out, I was still having some minor manic symptoms, but they felt I was good enough to go home. And, within a couple weeks, like all the medication took hold, all the new medication took hold, and I was back to being normal there.
What's
So that's a pretty recent manic episode, and that's the kind of shit that you do. You go and you walk 81 miles. And it couldn't
Yeah.
have been the hospital wing that I was walking back and forth on. I mean, it couldn't have been more than, I don't know. I'm gonna say like 20 meters, 25 meters. So like not all that long, but I just went back and forth, obviously for hours, for hours. I was doing this into the night. I just couldn't stop, back and forth, back and forth. Breakfast would come, I would stop and eat. Lunch comes, I'd stop and eat, and then I'd just get right back to it, right back to it. And you're doing this, and I thought I was totally normal at the time. I didn't realize, like, despite empirical data, I didn't realize that I was doing something like manic, really, But
Well, that was my
I was.
question. I'm curious what was on your mind, or what was going through your mind at this point? When let's talk about the 81-mile walk. What are
Yeah.
you thinking about when you're in the moment and that's happening?
Well,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I've got the image of Forrest Gump in my head, where he's just running and running and running and running, and
uh,
it's obviously not the same. But I don't
you
know.
know, well,
Is your mind
here's
blank, or are you focusing on something? Are you worrying about something, obsessing about a particular thought, or
here's the thing. You know, when I was having, let's go back to that psychotic break that I had, where I was just rapidly cycling between, euphoria and
and
I don't
crying?
know, and crying.
Hmm.
So I'm going through this, and I'm just like in my brain, I'm trying to stop it because I'm like, I know something is wrong here. Like this is not right, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. My thoughts weren't all that skewed. Like they were like I felt like I was rather lucid, to be honest, during that. But I just kept on with this behavior, and it it sucked. It really sucked. So the mania, I had, after a few days there, they take away your phone when you go into the hospital. After a few days there, if you like behave well, they give it back to you. So I put on the Red Hot Chili Peppers and just listened to them on repeat for hours, and I mean days, really. I just like got into this groove with them and just listened to the same like handful of songs again, again, and again, and again. I wasn't thinking of anything. I wasn't thinking this is crazy what I'm doing. I thought like, oh, this is good. I'm being healthy. I'm walking. That probably I thought that. Like I can't say specifically what it was, but I can tell you I didn't think that anything was wrong with me
Let me
when it
ask you.
was. When it was like
Well,
obviously it
yeah,
was.
yeah, and but hindsight is 2020, right? And while we're
Sure.
in those difficult phases, whether it's depression or manic episodes, or whether you're cutting yourself or using drugs or alcohol to cope, you 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 see it after the fact. But when you're in the moment, you're just using something as a coping mechanism to get by. Maybe another way I can ask you: when did you realize that you'd been acting inappropriately, for want of a better word?
It wasn't until the medication fully took hold and I was discharged from the hospital that I said, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. So, like a couple weeks after getting discharged, which would have been roughly a month since that manic episode, I realized this was not good, which is scary. I mean, it
Yeah,
really is,
it must be.
because like what else has happened that you don't think is the right thing? Well, I could tell you, like I once went and dropped $30,000 on furniture. Like didn't need to do that. Didn't need $30,000 worth of furniture, I'll tell you. But I did. And, in hindsight, it was a bad thing to do. Same thing with this woman who I was talking about earlier. In the moment, it was right. Like it was right to, just be terrible to her. But, later on, like I said, it's one of my regrets.
Nobody's perfect, and we all make mistakes. The only way to get to where
Yeah.
we want to be is by facing life lessons that you hopefully learn from, right?
Yeah. I think in fairness, and this is like a really important point in bipolar, is that once you're diagnosed, it's your responsibility to get treated, which is a very difficult thing to do. Case in point, me. But it's your responsibility to get treated. If something happens while you're getting treated, that's excusable. But if you're supposed to be getting treated and you don't, and something happens, that's on you. I mean, there's no excuse for that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh,
that's
it does. The favorite thing I've learned on this journey so far is the idea that not helping yourself is selfish. It was drilled into me that thinking about myself or doing what I needed was selfish. And it led to me freezing up or having a lot of inaction and difficulty doing simple things like brushing my teeth or doing the food shopping or cooking for yourself. Whereas the truth is, it's insulting and inconsiderate of the people around you to not look after yourself. Because if you are selfish and you look after yourself, care for yourself, do the best you can for yourself, you're then in the better position to help the people around you that you love and care for.
Mm.
And it makes total sense. Looking after yourself is inherently, and putting yourself first is inherently unselfish, which it took me, I wish I'd learned that a lot earlier.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I agree.
I want to ask you about moving forward now and where you see yourself, taking the next steps in your life. I don't want to bring you down, but you said to me that bipolar gets worse as you get older,
Yeah,
which I didn't know. Do you say that from experience or because you've been told it? Or
both, both.
I wonder if your experience with it getting worse is also the manifestation of your struggles of trying to get better and facing it rather than hiding from it is
Hmm.
one element, because that's what I did. And again, you and I aren't the same, but I wonder if there's that correlation. But understanding that as you get older, the disease might get worse. I had no idea. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, so the primary thing that's deteriorated is my memory. I used to have a very good memory, very sharp, and that's I just it's very difficult for me to remember things, even like basic stuff at work, even like when we're talking, I'd completely forgotten where we'd left off when after we took our break, like I forgot that. You
Me
brought
as
up some
well,
point.
actually. That you're not the only one. My memory is also bad in that sense, and I think everyone's memory gets worse as you get older. So you should bear that in mind. And
Yeah, but I'm still
we were talking
young.
about being kinder to yourself. Be kinder to
Yeah.
yourself as well.
Well, I'm doing that, and part of my doing that is taking a role that's far less challenging than I can
In
do
work, you mean?
in work. Yeah, yeah. So, there's the the memory is, that's the greatest issue with this, and the at least the line that I got from my psychiatrist as I've spoken about this with him is that there's like it could be in some cases, I don't think it's mine, it could be the medication that you're taking, like that can make your memory worse, but also and like cognitive function, like things like doing math, like I need a calculator to do basic math, like which is tough, I used to be able to do like, and I'm even talking about simple stuff like trying to find how many years between this year and that year, like I need to open up an Excel sheet. I need to open up a calculator, and it's just gotten hard. Um, so so the medication probably not in my case, but in others that could be the case. But also just having the years of bipolar like frying your brain, is likely a cause of it. And
The
when I
stress as
first
well. The stress affects your memory as you get older.
Sure, sure. I did have what they call a neuropsychiatric evaluation. I've had two of them. I had
Okay.
one about 5 years ago when I first started seeing this change, and I mentioned earlier how I'm just not able to handle stress the way I was used to. So when I first started seeing this change, I had a neuropsychiatric evaluation done. And then I had another one done, it was either last year or the year before, and I performed worse on it. So what this exam does is it tells you, your cognitive function. It's a evaluation of that,
Hmm.
and I've gotten worse. So there's that.
That's also an age thing as well, right? That's not just because of
Yeah, but
bipolar.
I'm 51. I'm not old. I shouldn't be seeing like these signs at this point.
I understand. I fear that I might settle into Alzheimer's or something similar. Too many knocks about head injuries when I was younger. So I do understand that fear. I guess I'm really trying to stay positive about it because there's only so much you can do. If you're not taking drugs like you were and you're not drinking, like I'm not, I'm exercising regularly. There's nothing more you can do because you are who you are based on your experiences and the things you've been through.
Yeah,
And you wouldn't be sat here with me now having this conversation if you hadn't walked the path that you've walked. And there's no point. I don't think there's any point in regretting a decision you didn't take or a path you didn't take in life, because you have no idea how it would have worked out. You think that it's going to lead to the dream girl or the dream job or the dream career or the dream holiday, whatever, but
Right.
you have no idea where it will actually lead you. And you could have been hit by a car 5 minutes later. That after that decision, everything that we are is based on what we've been through.
I actually was hit by a car.
Me
Not
as
a
well,
not
funny
not a car,
enough.
but it was an SUV to be precise.
Well, when was that? Was this related in any way to your bipolar? I'm just
No,
curious.
not at all,
Okay,
not
fine.
at all.
What happened?
I was riding my bike in Brooklyn, my bicycle, like two wheels, pedal powered, not um, like a motorbike. So I was riding along, minding my own business, and this SUV doing 40 miles an hour came up behind me, hit me. I went flying. I bounced off a couple cars, knocked off somebody's side view mirror, and then just, I kind of skidded along the pavement for I don't know how long, and woke up in the emergency room of Lutheran Hospital.
So you were
And
straight unconscious at this point.
yeah, well, I came to in the ambulance. I should say, like that's accurate. I came to in the ambulance, and it sucked. It took me about a year to walk again.
When was that?
2014.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's another stumbling block in your mental health journey, to suddenly be incapacitated physically like that. Maybe I can ask you about that. How was your mental health around that time after that
Um,
happened?
I,
Because
I,
that's
I
a
was,
difficult phase of your life.
yeah. Let me say this: everyone out there getting on a bike of any kind, wear a helmet, because I landed on my head, and I would have been a meatball, vegetable, whatever you want to call it, sitting in some hospital bed, hooked up to whatever kind of contraptions they have that keep you alive. Like that would have been me, but it wasn't. I broke the helmet in two places, so it was like a
Oh,
pretty.
so you were wearing a helmet, thank God.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, yeah. So how was my okay? So my mental health at that time, it wasn't great because it's only been, like I was saying before, like the past 5 6 years that I've been really disciplined and really serious about taking care of it. I mean, I did better in the years before that, but it's really been the past 5 6 years that I've been able to get it. Um, but I should say, been consistent about treating it. Been consistent about treating it. But my mental health, I mean, I don't remember specifics, but it wasn't great back then.
It's just not what I'm trying to say. Maybe it came at a bad time in your life where you were already starting to adjust to your diagnosis and trying to get better and get a grip on it, and then suddenly, bang, you have to focus on something completely different, and it
Yeah,
derails you, and it takes away the focus from your healing journey.
yeah, that's true. That's a really good point because at the end of the day, you can only do one thing at a time. There's all this noise about multitasking and doing multiple things concurrently, but you can really only do one thing at a time. Like even when you're multitasking, you're going between things. So you're working on one thing, and then you're working on another thing, and then one thing, and then another thing. So there's really just one thing that you're working on.
Yeah, you never give the one thing your full attention because you're distracted and trying to do too many things at once. You can't put 100% in because you're juggling something else. I want to go left field again quickly and
Okay.
ask about, because I didn't really cover it before. I want to understand the shame and guilt, and self-hatred you felt for yourself around your diagnoses, because at the start of the episode, we said how you're more adjusted to it now and you're more accepting of yourself, and society is as well. But it hasn't always been that way. And to have a mental illness it used to be a big black cross, like, oh, don't go near this person. But it's
Yeah.
not the case anymore. And stigma is coming away. We're ripping that band aid off. It's not as serious as people have thought. And actually, it's also not your fault because you have your grandmother and you have your trauma, which led to you developing these poor coping skills.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to understand that you couldn't do a lot about it. You have the responsibility now to grow and change, and that's what you're doing, and also educating other people. But it isn't your fault. Tell me about how you would feel when you were younger about being broken, being damaged, if you use those terms like I did.
Well, I mean, when I was younger, I really didn't know, like when I was younger, what I thought was that everybody else is the same as me. I just can't hold it together. That was my stance. I thought that I just didn't have the intelligence. I didn't think that I had the coping mechanisms, didn't have the ability to be able to manage these wild mood swings. And also back then, they're just, I mean, we were just like getting into the internet world, and
Mm.
like the information just wasn't as accessible, and people weren't as outspoken. Like you really had to go out and search very intentionally to find information about mental illness. And so that wasn't something that was on my radar. Like I wasn't searching it. It wasn't like there were blogs out there to read. I mean, maybe there were a couple, but I didn't go and search it. No, I should say it was my senior year of college that the internet finally like broke through, and that's when it started becoming available, and everybody had modems, and it was like that for a few years, for several years, and then finally we got caught up to the modern age. But the point that I'm making is that today information is widely accessible. Back then, information was not widely accessible, and so I just didn't know. Like I would get a diagnosis because I told you I had two diagnoses before I started taking it before I got the third and started taking it seriously. And I got it, and despite taking the medication, I was just like, this is a fake disease. Like what? Like this? What is this? Like I just can't handle the symptoms. Other people can handle it. Everybody's the same. I'm not different. Like that kind of thing. So
When you say a fake disease, what did you mean?
when I was coming up, people would talk about depression. First of all, it wasn't talked in the volume in which it's talked about today. But if it would come up, people would be, oh, just smile, like, you know, you're fine, like, don't worry about it. Like it was, yeah,
Just
that's
make.
the
Why
kind of
can't
thing.
you just make yourself happy?
Well, exactly.
All
That's
that
exactly
crap.
that's it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And then with the mania, it's like, oh, like just stop acting crazy. Like what's wrong with you? Calm down. So that's the kind of feedback that you got. Whereas today, you're more likely to get somebody who's compassionate and understanding, and has the wherewithal to maybe say, hey, like, are you okay? Like, I'm concerned about
Mm.
you,
Mm.
something along those lines.
Was there a point as you've gotten older, and we do have the internet, and you do have information that I can't remember if I asked you this. What was the point where you really sat back and accepted your diagnosis and said, "Okay, now's the time for me to get a grip on things, and I have to accept
Honestly,
this, and this is
it's
me."
it's really been within the past couple of years.
But it's been
I
a
just, I,
gradual
I, I
process, not a one.
yeah,
It's
I mean,
not.
I just like there's different levels to acceptance. I'll say that, and I accepted part of it, needing the medication, needing the therapy, but not accepting all of it, which is, like I've been very terrible to people. I've done like a lot of stupid things that I shouldn't have. And, there are ways that I can better manage the illness, like taking a job that's less intellectually stimulating. So that's only been as of late. That's only been as of late.
There's always a few steps to change and healing, isn't there?
Yeah, that's a really
I,
good way of putting it.
Well, I think for me, I kind of see it as a set of waves that gradually get higher up on that learning journey where you figure some things out for yourself and things are going well, and then you have a setback and you come up again. But now you have some new tools from the last hill and you get a little bit higher and you're good for a while, but then you have a setback and you come up again. setback. It's a shame it's like that, but you kind of have to or I found you had to get things wrong and mess things up a bit to learn how to do them a bit differently next time.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's
not a
true.
straight line.
It's also, there's this. I actually had a mini war with one of my
A mini
psychologists, where
war.
a mini war, yeah, a mini battle, if you
Hmm.
will, with one of my psychologists, where I was lamenting, how the illness keeps, getting in the way of me, building side businesses, gets me in the way of like developing, stronger relationships with people.
Hmm.
And what she said, well, just accept starting over. And I was like, I don't accept starting over. Because if you look at it, if you're starting over, if you're here and then you start over and you come back, and then here you start over, you come back, you're in a different place from the person who starts something and is
Yeah.
just able to continue it. You know, you never get to that point
Yeah.
of like completion, and when you have completion, it's satisfaction. So she, I'm not seeing her anymore, but that was something that we went to task at, because I disagreed strongly, right? I mean, that makes sense. Doesn't
I
it make
think
sense?
so. I think
Okay.
so. Um, please don't let me. Just looking at the time. We have to end soon, right?
Yeah, about
I'll,
15
I'll cut this
minutes.
part out.
Okay.
Trying to think what else I might ask you. I don't know what else I might ask you. I want to ask about your trauma, but I don't want to go there out of respect. So I'm not sure what else I might say. Is there anything that you think you'd like to add? I
Um,
think it's been a good conversation, so we can always do this again.
yeah, I think it's been a great conversation, to be honest.
Has it
I think
helped you? Have
you're,
you enjoyed it?
I, yeah, I think you're a very good podcast host, Chris. I think you're very, very
Thanks,
good.
mate.
So
Uh, I
I,
appreciate
I,
it.
yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I do think that you're very skilled at this. So
Thanks.
I'm sure that the podcast is going to be very successful.
The difficulty is that it's not always the most fun thing to talk about and listen to. So, yeah, people aren't always. I think it's easier to listen to a music podcast or a computer game podcast than one about mental health and,
Yeah,
real serious shit.
but it's important to get the voices heard.
Well, thanks, man. Maybe I needed to hear that
Yeah.
this week. I had a bit of a dip in confidence last week.
Oh yeah.
Um, well, only because of
Due to
my
what?
figuring about having autism, I guess. I don't know. In the end, now I see it as a positive because I know more about myself and I understand why I am the way I am, where my struggles have come from, and why I've made all these mistakes all my life. But at the same time, it irritates the shit out of me because I wish I'd figured it out earlier, you know? The same with you.
Yeah.
You were bipolar, and if you'd have figured it out I don't know, at high school, rather than waiting till your late 30s. You think about the different things you might have done or the mistakes you wouldn't have made.
Yeah, I would be a different person for sure. I would be a very different person. But one thing that there were two things that contributed to me, finally taking seriously the illness.
Hmm.
One was desperation. Like I had to get it taken care of, or I wouldn't have a place to live. Like this was an edict that came down from my father. He just said, "You have to get help. You
Okay.
have to get help."
Hmm.
That's it. If you're going to stay here, you need to get help. So there was that, but then also maturity. I was old enough where I could say, hey, I recognize that I have this illness, and I recognize that it requires treatment, and that treatment looks like this, which is medication management and going to see a psychologist. And so once I accepted that, then I was like, on my way. And it's still a journey, right? I mean, we're always on a journey, and who knows, there could be some kind of breakthrough blockbuster bipolar medication that comes out where, I
Oh,
would only
please,
need to
God.
take, yeah, where I would only need to take one pill a day. Like that would be great. If there was a way that I could get around having to like fork down or force down two fistfuls of drugs every day, like,
Is it that
so the
many?
morning, it is the morning is a little bit heavier than the evening, but all in all, I think I think it's like 11 or 13. It's one of those odd numbers, medications that I'm taking for either bipolar or counteracting the side effects of bipolar. Crazy.
It's a lot,
Counteracting
man.
the side effects of the medication. Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. But, it has me in a very good place, and I'm functioning, and I'm here talking to you, and I mean, just this, what we're doing, not too long ago, I wouldn't have done it.
No, and
I just wouldn't have had the comfort level with reaching out and doing this.
well, and nothing but respect, man. It is a process, right? And um, for me, I'm very comfortable talking about my shit because I am the way I am, and I know why I am the way I am, and I'm comfortable with that. It's none of it's my fault. It's my job to change it and improve it for myself. And also, I can give this platform to other people to talk, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone is ready to be open, and the shame and the stigma that comes with it, the self-loathing, doubt you have in yourself, does take a long time to get over. And it's only in the last year that I've really got a grip on it. I had the worst year of my life, and it has been the making of me, and I'm very grateful for my journey. But you must just do things at your own pace. You'll get there
Yeah.
over time. Keep doing you. You sound like a really good guy, and I have faith in
Thank
you.
you.
And dude, if you need to talk, you know where I am. Please come back another time on the podcast, and we can carry on the conversation and maybe get an update from you, see where you are, and yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully we've taken steps forward for next time.
Yeah. Maybe the book will be out by then.
Well, if it is, then I definitely want you back on so we can promote it,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I want a
Cool.
signed copy.
Yeah.
Buy a
You
signed
got it.
copy from you,
You got it. No problem. No
buddy.
problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I
I'll
wanted
wrap
to
up
say
with you,
one other
man.
thing, like that came to
Go on,
mind
hit
as
me.
you were that when you were talking. I think this concept of sharing your diagnoses, sharing your journey, all that. I think it's the ease with which you do it is I think it's a generational thing. Like younger generations, like I'm still living in that world of when I was a young person where I'm hearing it's a fake disease, you're depressed, just be happy, like you're manic, stop acting so crazy. Like those voices are still very strong in my head. I think that millennials and Gen Z, they've come up through a much different world. They've come up through a much different world. So, which is great, and I love it that they're out there and that they're
Not
sharing,
suffering. That's
not
beautiful.
suffering. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Well, thank you very much. It's really nice of you to say. I don't know about generational, but in my head, I heard you say generational talent, but that's so egotistical. It's just ridiculous.
Well, there is an element of that.
No,
There
man,
is an
no.
element of
No, thank you. It's nice of you to say, but no, I'm definitely cutting this part out.
that. Okay.
But thanks. I'll let you go. I see the time. I really
Okay.
appreciate you coming on,
Yeah. Thanks for
and
having me.
I can't wait to stick it up online for other people to hear. So thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been very huge for me personally, and like I said before, you've been great. You've been absolutely fantastic. So, thanks for doing what you do. And I
No
think you're
problem,
made
man.
for this. I think you're made for this, to be honest. The questions were fantastic, and you just did a great job of balancing everything out.
This is the part where I'm going to stop recording, but